All right, so this is 1.2, which is basic terms. There's going to be 8 basic terms that we go over, and then we're going to go over 2, 4, 6, 8 other terms. So there's a total of 16 terms. We'll talk about the other 8, the second 8 when we get there. But starting with our 8 basic terms. These are terms that are going to come up all the time throughout the year. So you want to make sure you know these 8 terms. This is a big section on the test, these 8 basic terms. The first is a population. Okay, and it's, you've heard of the term population before, population of the United States. That's all the people in the United States, right? Population is all the people. Okay, so it's a collection of individuals or events whose properties are to be analyzed. Key word here, though, that I'm going to write in is all. Collection of all individuals, collection of all events that we're going to analyze. Okay, it's the big group. Okay, we never analyze the whole population. That's where a lot of people get confused about. What we analyze is called a sample, which is actually our second term, which I'll talk about in just a sec. So I'll write it in now. We analyze a sample. We take a piece and we analyze that to then make conclusions about the whole population. Okay, we have 2 types of populations that we need to keep in mind. We have the finite. Okay, I don't know why they changed the way they say it, because we call the other one infinite. You've heard of the word infinite before. Infinite means unlimited. There's no end to it. Okay, finite, it means it can be physically listed. We have an ending point. So, for example, if I used teachers at Clovis North, that is finite. I have an end. There is actually a physical list in our school of every teacher at Clovis North. That has a finite piece. If I said trees in the forest, right? I guess you could technically go out and list every tree, but there's one thing that's a problem. Trees continue to grow. So as you're listing all of these trees in the entire forest, probably one has already grown, so you have to go back and list that one again. It would never end. That's an infinite list. This is used a lot in assembly lines when they're building something, making something. There's an infinite because it's continuously happening. We don't know where it's going to end until it ends, right? Basically, the factory shuts down. That's where it ends. But until that point, it's an infinite supply. It's just keep coming and coming and coming as we grow and grow in our pieces of things we're selling. Okay, so sample is a subset. That means a piece, okay, small piece. This is what we actually study. Okay, in my population example, teachers at Clovis North, maybe I would take all math teachers, okay? This is not a good sample, which we'll talk about in section 4, why this is not a good sample, but you could probably figure it out. I mean, if I was talking about trying to make conclusions about the teachers at Clovis North, math teachers are going to be very different from English teachers, are going to be very different from foreign language teachers, right? We would want a better subset of that, all right? So we might not want to do math teachers. If we were talking about math teachers in Clovis Unified, we might use the math teachers at Clovis North. But if we're talking about the teachers at Clovis North, all of the teachers, we'd probably do something like 3 teachers from each subject. All right, it's not the best still, but it's a much better way of sampling, right? We're going to get a little bit of each type of subject. So that would be the sample. This is going to be what we actually study. So we're going to look at the data based on this sample, and then we're going to use inferential statistics to talk about the whole population. We can make conclusions about the population from our sample. And a lot of people say, well, you didn't talk to everyone. That's the whole point of statistics, though. You can't, in most situations, talk to everyone. We got to find a way to get reasonable conclusions without having to talk to every single person possible. Okay. The next term, the third term, is variable. This is what we're talking about. Okay, this is what are we looking at? Okay, in my sample, what am I studying? Okay, so the formal definition is characteristic of interest. So we might, if we're looking at teachers, maybe we're looking at how long we've been teaching. Okay, what's the average amount of years a teacher has been teaching at Clovis North? Okay, then we get to the experiment. Most of you know what an experiment is. You've taken a science class before. I mean, that's how you get your data, right? We go and do something. A planned activity to yield data. We go and do something, we get data. Okay, so in our example we've been talking about, the years of teaching of teachers at Clovis North, we would go ask how long have you been teaching? Okay, a lot of people get confused about experiments because they expect experiments to be things that you did in like chemistry or physics class or biology class where you're dissecting or mixing or something. A lot of the experiments in stats is asking a question, taking a survey, going out and looking at something, okay? Looking at the colors of something. It's something simple a lot of times in terms of experiment. We're not mixing chemicals, we're not dissecting a frog or something like that. We are just asking a question a lot of times. Then we get to our next two words are the same actually. It's data. So we can have a singular data point. So that means one. Okay, singular means one if you didn't know. So one data point. So it's one value that's part of our sample. Okay, that's the first data. So we go out and ask one teacher, and they're going to answer. Maybe you ask me, my answer is 5 years. I have been teaching for 5 years. Okay. And that's it. We got one data point. That means we have data. It's only one data point. We need more than one data point. So that's what our second word is. It is also the word data, but we're talking about the plural form of data. Okay, meaning all the data. Okay, when we talk about the plural form of data, it means all the data we want. So it's all the values belonging to the sample. Okay, so we would make a list of the data points. Okay, maybe we went and talked to a whole bunch of teachers, and we got 3, 5, 20, 28, 25, 35, ... Okay, we just got a whole bunch of answers. We would list every single answer we got from our sample. So it's all the sample. We've asked the question to everyone in our sample. We list the answers. How many years of teaching? 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, 28 years, and so on. You can technically summarize it. We're not going to do this very often, but we could say I had 30 people with average 18. Okay, we're not going to do that very much because we'll talk about a different term. That really, that's what that is. But sometimes it's summarized that way. Instead of listing 1,000 terms, they kind of do that. Okay, the next term is a statistic. Okay, this is usually the thing we're trying to calculate. It's a numerical value summarizing sample data. All right, so statistic summarizes sample. There's going to be a confusion here with the next term, so you got to look at the first letter. Okay, the first letter of statistic is S, relates to sample, which has the first letter of S. Statistic, sample. Okay, so it's a value that summarizes. Okay, so that's any way to summarize data. We could look at the mean of the years. So maybe I had a mean of 15 years. That is a statistic. We summarized our data. Okay, that's why I said that second thing where average of 18 is not really a good way to write the data because it's really a statistic. We're using a statistic. So mean of 15 years. You could get a median. That should be a term you recognize. of 12 years. That is a different statistic. Notice there's lots of different ones. We could get a standard deviation, another term you might recognize, of 1.2 years. That is also a statistic. It's summarizing the data in a different way. Mean is a middle. Median is a middle. Standard deviation is how spread out. It's still summarizing our data though, so that's a statistic. There's lots of different statistics. Next term is a parameter. Okay, this one is, notice it's basically the same definition. The only word that's different is population. So instead of summarizing the sample we got, which is the small subset we use, this would be somehow you got information about the entire population. Okay, that makes it a parameter. So notice starting letter P, parameter, starting letter P, population. A parameter relates to a population, where a statistic relates to a sample. Look at the first letter, it's a big hint. And it's the same thing. So we might have a mean of 15 years, okay? They look exactly the same, but this would be for the whole population. So maybe this is just at Clovis North. It's not considered our sample. It has to be our population, our whole population. So we went and somehow talked to every single person at Clovis North, found how many years, and made the average, and that's 15 years. Okay, so that was from our population. So you got to be careful. The different types of statistics and parameters are actually the same. Mean, median, mode, standard deviation, variance, blah, 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 blah. All those things, they can be either a statistic or a parameter. Okay, you just have to pay attention. Is it from the sample data? That makes it a statistic. Is it from the population data? That makes it a parameter. Okay, and then we have all of our different types of variables. So notice this is the third term, so I'll number these real quick so we have things to go off of. We have population, which population then broke down into finite or infinite. We have samples. We have variables, which we're about to talk about more. That is the characteristic of interest, the thing you're looking at. We have experiments, data singular, data plural, statistic, parameter. Those are our 8 basic terms. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the third one, variables, a little more. We can break variables down into more pieces. So we have qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative is a variable that describes. It is a description. We're going to look at all sorts of variables in class. So you need to know how is it looking at the variable. Is it describing it, or is it quantifying, which means measurement? Okay, a lot of people have a difficulty with this. Think measurement. Quantitative means measurement. Qualitative means description. So if we're talking about like color, classes, shoes you're wearing, clothes you're wearing, that's a qualitative value. It's describing. If you're talking about height, speed, length, something like that, that is a quantitative variable. Okay. If we have a qualitative variable, we can break it down into nominal or ordinal. Notice my highlighting is corresponding to what type of variable. So we can break down a qualitative variable even more. So we have a variable, it's qualitative. Now we can choose, is that qualitative variable nominal or ordinal? Nominal means no rank. So nominal, no rank. Or is it ordinal? Order. Does it have order? Okay. So that'd be nominal would be like if I told you we're looking at what class you're taking. So English, math, science, those don't have order. That is a qualitative because describing the class, and there's no order to which one's better than the other, right? If you had order, it would be like if I asked you a survey and said, how do you feel about this? Is it good? Is it bad, good, great? Right? Bad is worse than great. Okay, so that has order to it. So that is a qualitative variable. It's describing how you feel, but it has order to the answers. Quantitative we actually have a couple different ways. So the first way to describe quantitative is discrete versus continuous. These should be math words you recognize. Discrete means countable values. There's gaps between. Okay, so discrete means 1, 2, 3, 4. Number of people is discrete. You can't have 0.5 people. It has to be 1, 2, 3. It has to be a whole number, right? That makes it discrete. Continuous means uncountable or no gap. A lot of people get confused about this. If you are measuring a distance, right, you can have any number of decimals to describe that distance. That makes it continuous. Okay, meaning we can have any number of decimals. The other way, so these are actually separate, so don't get confused. It's not one of the four. It's discrete or continuous and interval or ratio. So we pick, is it interval or is it ratio? Interval means 0 is a measurement. Really, the only thing that is true for is temperature, right? If I told you it's 0 degrees outside, that does not mean there's no temperature outside. 0 degrees is one of the temperatures, okay, that you can have. It just means something. Ratio, on the other hand, is 0 is the absence of measurement, right? If I told you there was 0 people in that room, that means there are no people whatsoever in that room. Okay, so 0 means there's nothing in ratio. In interval, 0 means it's just a measurement. And once again, that's basically temperature is the only thing that's interval. Okay, and then I have this cool little tree diagram to help you. So every one of these is a variable. Okay, so they're all variables. It's either a qualitative variable or a quantitative variable. So every variable can be described as one of those. And every qualitative variable can be described as either nominal or ordinal. So I can have an ordinal qualitative variable. That's a descriptor of that variable. And in quantitative, we can describe it as continuous or discrete, one of the two, and also as interval or ratio. So I could have a ratio, discrete, quantitative variable. All of those words combined describing that variable. Okay. So this one is a little longer because we have a lot of words. We'll go over a lot of these words. You will definitely want to start making flashcards or something of these words with their definitions because you need to know these words. They come up all the time, especially those 8 basic terms all the time in this chapter as well as the entire school year. Okay, so you can write your summary.